I can see it like it was yesterday. A young couple standing before me, staring lovingly into each other's eyes, holding hands. And the lay reader began reading the psalm. The voice of my beloved. Look, he comes leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing in at the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. I couldn't help but think as I stood there hearing those words and looking at that couple and thinking, God, they're young. Do they really know what they're doing? I've done that so many times now that I have lost count. In our 3-year cycle of readings from Scripture, this is the only time that the Song of Songs is read from our first lesson. You heard it here this morning, and you will not hear it again read in this context for 3 more years. There was a great debate among ancient Hebrew scholars about whether or not to include the Song of Songs in the ancient Scriptures, the official Scriptures of the Hebrew faith. On the one hand, it can be read as an almost sensual reading for which some people would say it has no place in worship. There was one lone ancient Hebrew scholar who dedicated his life practically to seeing that this song, this piece of Scripture, was included in the Hebrew Scriptures. And the essence of his argument was, our God is a lover. Our God is a lover. He loves us as a people. He loves us collectively, and He loves each and every one of us. And he held that argument until it was included in the Hebrew Scriptures. And once every 3 years we hear it read in this context. The argument for inclusion was just that. An interesting concept of who God is. Because his argument was, first and foremost, God is a lover. God is a lover. For the last 3 months of our readings from the Hebrew Scriptures, they have all traced that history of Israel, beginning with Abraham leaving his home and beginning a journey with his elderly wife, Sarah, a childless couple. Leaving all because Abraham had a dream, and in the dream the voice said, pack up and go. I will take you to a new land and you will become a new people. And that's exactly what they did. Along the way, they had children, even despite their old age. The children grew and multiplied and became tribes. The tribes became an identifiable people, the Hebrews, those Hebrew people. Their journey took them into other lands and other places. In Egypt, they became slaves. They endured slavery with the hope that this lover God would somehow free them. In the past few weeks we have heard of Moses leading those tribes out of captivity through the turmoil of the desert into a new promised land. And on the edge of that promised land, his going up to the mountaintop and receiving those 10 laws, those 10, if you will, institutions by which they would live. 10 rules. 10 rules for an entire nation. Children could learn them by counting on their fingers. It seems so long ago and so simple and so far away. Unfortunately, over time, each of those 10 rules got discussed and argued about and debated and clarified and re-clarified and re-clarified until the 10 became hundreds. Hundreds. And finally they arrived at that ultimate argument that is the byword of all Episcopalians. We've never done it that way before. That's always the way we have done it. It gives rise to those wonderful Episcopalian jokes. How many Episcopalians does it take to change the light bulb at the church? Well, obviously 1, to unscrew the old one. 2, to screw in the new one. 3, to create a shrine for the first one that burned out. And 4, for a bishop to come and bless the new one. I cannot tell you how many times I have been there and heard it. In our gospel for this morning, Jesus has returned to Capernaum after going on the other side of Lake Gennesaret and feeding the 5,000 and healing the sick. Comes back to the synagogue in the town where he teaches and he preaches, and his audiences grow week by week. They come from as far away as Jerusalem. And ultimately it is the religious professionals, the scribes, who come, the Pharisees with them, the experts on the law. Do they come and ask him where his source for healing comes from? Do they ask him what he means when he prays, "Our Father"? Father. They don't ask him any of that. They really don't ask him anything except, why do your followers, your disciples, eat with dirty, unwashed hands? Why do they not go through the ritual washing that is prescribed in all of those laws that we have? Jesus says, this people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. And then he turns the tables on them. The ancient law prescribed that parents, when they grew old, were to be taken care of by their children. There was no Social Security. There were no retirement homes. And yes, that was a burden for many people, as we who have done that know what that's like. So the religious professionals created something called Corban. A way to get around that ancient tradition of taking care of your elders. If you made a sizable donation to that religious group, then you didn't have to take care of them. And Jesus exposes them for the hypocrites that they are. And then he goes on to say, listen to me, all of you, and understand something. There is nothing outside a person that going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. It seems to me that the point of this gospel lesson is that we are not just dealing with the good guys, Jesus and the disciples, or the bad guys, the Pharisees. No, what we're dealing with is a rather fundamental tension. Live our life on the basis of freedom as opposed to living our life on laws and regulations. You see, if my primary concern is obeying all the requirements, which is what those Pharisees were saying you had to do, if we live our life according to all the requirements, then we would be here every time the doors open. We would be keeping all of the commandments. We'd be fervent in prayer 3 times a day at the very least. And we would be tithing as a minimum gift to the church. Those have all been rules. And in most cases they stand. And it's Jesus who says to the disciples, you have your choice between living according to the law or living according to the gospel, the freedom. Temptation is always to find the structure, to create the structure, to make the law and say, this is the way it's supposed to be done. I've heard that phrase, that's not the way we've done it in the past. I've heard that my entire career as a priest. That's why I love congregations like this. Occasionally we fall back on that, but most of the time, no. Most of the time, no. It seems to me that the ancient rabbi who insisted on including love songs in the Hebrew Bible got it all right. He got it right. The ancient law grew out of a love affair. The ancient law grew out of a love affair. It was God's love for a people who who said, "Let me lead you to not only a new land, but a new life." He called them into a relationship, a lasting relationship that was characterized by all love, not a contract. There are standards. Actually, in our society, marriage is viewed by the state as a contract. There are certain standards that must be met. And if those standards are not met, then the law says there is a remedy. The remedy is divorce. The remedy is alimony. The remedy is child support. It's all about meeting the demands of the law. Those are not bad things. What about the relationship in which it begins in love? I leave with you a quote I came across this week from an old and dear friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us. The heart of the Christian faith is not the law. It is not intellectual truth, right belief, or academic and abstract concepts which can be discussed, understood, and therefore controlled like a law can. At the heart of the Christian faith is a mystery which must be experienced to be known. It is the mysterious freedom of being born again. God's grace, which is the good news, is the free gift of that love that asks only our response. A response made possible by grace and made finally in freedom. It is this mysterious passion of early love that is God's gift to you, and to me. It's all about love.